Hello and welcome to episode 18 of Into the Spotlight. I'm Morley.
And I'm Ryan. Today's guest is a media professional with over a decade of experience as a photographer and video producer. He is someone who has a vast knowledge of camera gear and understands how to use visual mediums for their full potential and impact. He has worked across a wide variety of projects, and he is using that knowledge and experience to start his own online academy named Speedy Photographer to teach those skills to others. I have also had the pleasure of getting to know this person while doing my master's degree at Ryerson. Please welcome Kevin Raposo to the show.
Hey guys, thank you very much for having me and for the intro. That's very kind of you. All those things, I'm humbled. Thank you.
It's no problem. We always try to do the best we can with that. But no, thank you for taking the time to join us. You're someone that I was always thinking of when we first started this show to interview, because even just getting from our time at Ryerson together and getting to know you, like, you have such a impressive resume when it comes to videography and photography, where I was just like, man, if I could just know as much as he does, I could feel like I know what I'm doing in this field. So, like, let's just start the beginning. How did you begin your this journey into photography and video, and how has that led to where you are now?
Yeah, so I think it was around, I picked up a camera when I was like 14 years old, and I obviously fell in love with it really quickly. So I was really lucky in that sense that I got to figure out what I wanted to do in life pretty early. But then I actually started more in video. I did my undergrad and I was more focused on video side of things. But around 2011, 2012, which was also around the time that I graduated and finished undergrad, they were coming out with DSLRs that had camera feet, or like, the DSLRs were coming out with video features. And it was funny because everybody was talking about the video features, but there were still photo cameras first. And I started dabbling into it and going, wait a minute, this is not only fun and something I like doing, but it's also a way for me to diversify my skill and income. So let's jump into photography. And a lot of those skills are transferable, and then it just kind of grew from there. And I would say I probably shoot 50% on each side. I'm really doing a little bit of both on each side.
That's incredible. And just one thing I know from one of your videos, that you said you even learned a little bit from YouTube, which is amazing, because now we have this wonderful resource where we could just go and learn different types of techniques, which you are starting to do now with all the experience that you've accumulated.
Yeah, it's funny because my journey with YouTube was also interesting because I've created accounts, been banned from YouTube for copyright infringement and all that, learned from YouTube. It's YouTube University it's definitely where I got my start with a lot of photography concepts, because I understood a lot of the principles of, videos are applicable in photography, but certain things like, posing, things that aren't really as prominent in video that come into play when you're shooting photo, or long exposure photography that doesn't really exist in video. Those things were stuff that I kind of took in through YouTube University, because I was, like I said, most of my attention was on video until after graduating from undergrad back in 2012.
Yeah, that's like looking at just like your Instagram and your portfolio, like it's very clear that you've done a pretty huge variety of work. Like there's sports photography, there is nature, there's portraiture. Um, so it's cool now that you've sort of like transitioned, or not even transitioned, but at this new venture of teaching, because I feel like you can boil it all down into like the fundamentals, right? Like you have to go and do a lot of experience and get all that experience. I don't know why I use the same word twice before you can sort of start distilling it into some communicating that information. I mean, I was watching some of your videos earlier. Like it's pretty incredible, even just the few that you've made, how much like quality info you can pack into like an 8-minute video. I think it's going to do well.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I can talk a little bit about Speedy Photographer and how I got to that point if you guys would like to. It
Definitely.
was when I guess around 2014, 15, I had been shooting a lot of concerts and stuff, and I was really involved in that scene, but it was also tough because I was working a day job, and it was like I was shooting a gig at 2 a.m. and then the next day going to work, and I didn't have the energy to do it anymore. So then I kind of started dabbling more. Like you said, my portfolio kind of diversified, and I shot wedding video. I kind of did landscape work. I kind of went all over the map, and then I finally landed on sports photography, and I've been shooting that primarily. Um, and a lot of corporate video, continuing to do that. And then I went after about, I would say, 3 years. It was in 2018. That's when I ended up meeting meeting Ryan. I ended up going to school, or wanted to do the master's degree, because I actually wanted to become a college prof. I thought, okay, I want to teach this stuff to college students. And then halfway through, I just suddenly realized, like, I could probably distill this into an online course. I've got the video skill to put this together, I think, anyway. And I had been working on the curriculum documents at Ryerson for a while. I was like, okay, let's try and twist this and turn this. And then I spent about a year scripting all that content and turning it into the course that I launched. It was just about 3 weeks ago. And I put some of that stuff out on YouTube for free. And that the thing that I was really focused on when developing it was definitely getting to the point, or trying to be as speedy or as quick as possible. By primarily by scripting everything, because I never thought I would be a guy who would be comfortable in front of the camera teaching anything, to be quite honest. But I by scripting everything, the teleprompter is the secret to everything. You suddenly become comfortable because you're just reading instead of trying to recite from memory.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who has done a fair bit of voiceover for my videos, I remember on my first one, maybe my second as well, I just winged it. I was literally like describing my thought process as I was watching it play out. And then like the third one, I was like, oh my gosh, if I script this out, it's so much easier. And now I'm in this like weird in between state where I kind of do half and half, and I'm getting comfortable enough that I can sort of like divert from it when I want to. But it's very much a process in getting comfortable with speaking in front of a camera. It is not a natural thing by any means. And yeah, considering like you said, if you've only really been having the course out for 3 weeks, and obviously you did so much prep, the results you are putting out show that prep.
I appreciate it. It's funny. I mean, I'm sure you can relate. It's like it actually is a skill, I would say. I mean, there's obviously a reason why you have TV newscasters and whatnot. I mean, I think when I looked at some of the first videos that I recorded, they were so boring because I had no energy or enthusiasm in front of the camera. And then I got a little piece of advice that somebody said, which was, whatever you think you're doing, give 150% in front of the camera. And then all of a sudden you'll become the person that you probably want to portray yourself as, just because, if you're talking to someone one-on-one, it's a little different than when you're talking to a camera. You need to be more expressive. You need to create interest, something that makes people want to look at the screen. So, but the same, I'm sure, goes into voice acting, using different cadences, different different tonalities in your voice and stuff.
Oh, definitely. I look back on my early videos, and when we had that episode with Awesome, like he one thing he said that was really stuck with me was, if you look back on your work and aren't embarrassed by it, it means that you're not growing. Like, you should be embarrassed by it. And I cringe sometimes, but it's good. It's good to like feel that progression. And I just think like, wow, I sound so low energy and bored. Uh, it's definitely like one of the clearest differences from then until now.
And it takes time to develop that. Like, even it's one thing to develop our skills with the camera, whether it's for photo and video, but to put yourself on camera performing, because it's still a performance. Even teaching, like, even my mom says she's teaching through Zoom right now all of her college class, and she says like every day is like a performance. You always have to kind of bring that energy in. It's not always easy, but it's just something that takes time and refined over time as well.
Totally. I 100% agree. And it's even more hard. I mean, for me, it's pre-recorded stuff, right? Like I said, I
Right.
script everything. That's the secret to sounding like, what you're talking about. But when you're doing it in a live format, like you're saying, that it would probably be even more difficult. I mean, I still try to learn and improve and watch others. If there's one thing I watch a lot of on YouTube now, it's other people, kind of how they communicate messages effectively. That's something I've been trying to take a lot away from. And I mean, it's a learning process. It'll continue. I'll hopefully continue to improve in that regard.
But you've always had like a passion for that. You were always good at that, because you even said you've had a passion for teaching and doing this sort of stuff. And it's like you mentioned, like, what's one thing I'm learning to do with like just even my own side projects or for work is like distilling so much complex visual information to like the shorter and shorter time frames. And that takes time to do. Like, not all of us can be like Aaron Sorkin with the way that stuff rolls off the page or off the timeline. So using these online platforms like YouTube is another to kind of teach your classes. What has that experience been like so far in the weeks that, well, like in the lots of prep that you've been doing for it, but in what's it been like so far doing it?
It's definitely, it's kind of funny because I went into building this online course having some of the curriculum written from the work at Ryerson that I did, and I was like, okay, I can probably get this done in, I don't know, 4 to 6 months. 12 months later, I was sitting there like, okay, I could probably get this done in 13 months. Then I finally finished it and launched it. And I was progressively posting stuff on YouTube along the way, just trying to slowly build up some kind of semblance of, a platform online for myself, because I had never really put myself out there before. And I'll say the number one thing that I learned over the course of building this content is that it's 25% scripting, 2% actually shooting, and then 73%, is that the math? Did I get that right? The 73% editing. I was just cutting videos all day long. I was like,
Yeah.
man, it doesn't matter how well scripted something is. That's something that I realize it's going to take double whatever you think it is. It's the video editing process for the content. Because if you want it to be clear, concise, and to the point, and you got to really cut out the meat, cut out the fat and get to the meat. And it's tough to do that without aggressively editing nonstop.
Well, and I think a lot of people appreciate that, especially in the day and age of like, you look up a recipe to make a cake and you have to scroll through like 10 pages of background and everything else for no reason. Or even like you were saying, like the YouTube University, like you're looking for like a photo or an editing technique, and you have to like sit through like 3 minutes of fluff for nothing. Like it's kind of funny. We live in this world where everyone has a phone in their pocket, and like everyone's a content creator, right? If they want to be, but like very few people actually have like the know-how and the tools to sort of like, like, I mean, I'm not to say that like people who don't have the experience aren't going to be good at it, but just by having that background, you have this like pretty big leg up in communication. But it's interesting too, because like I would imagine that editing surprise, like the amount that it takes, when you were doing wedding videos or things like that, like people don't expect the same sort of like fast jump cuts and everything else. It's like an in the moment experience. I even noticed that when me and my girlfriend made some sort of like cooking videos, and I was like, wow, this editing is so easy. I'm not trying to like cut everything down within an inch of its life. Like we can make it a little more relaxed, because it doesn't have that same sort of like expectation of classic YouTube video.
Yeah, the jump cut on YouTube is it's definitely an art to to make it seem like it's not. I mean, obviously there's a purpose for it, but it's also an art in the way that timing it is it's challenging sometimes, and knowing when to give yourself some breathing room and when not to. It's I never thought I would be analyzing the jump cut as much as I have over the last 12 months, but yeah, it's really, like you said, it's about finding breathing room, or when it's a good time to, cut more rapidly than you might see in the average video. But you're right, people definitely appreciate it. I think I mean, at the end of the day, when you're putting together educational content of any kind, the number one thing people are clicking on that video for is information. And if you can get to that information ASAP, well, number one, YouTube's algorithms are going to love the fact that you have higher engagement time, because people will be watching for a longer period of your shorter video. And then can't remember what number 2 was, but number 1 was that.
It's true in the sense that I mean, it's funny with the jump cut, something we discussed in a prior episode. It's just like how it went from being this very amateur, don't ever do this technique, to being such a staple to the point where you're seeing it in ads now. It's very strange, but I guess it's just an effective technique to just communicate that information the shortest time possible. And what you said with editing as well is very true, because I don't know, I like editing, but it's by far one of the most time consuming process with this, because it's like you're writing all over again the project, but just with whatever it is that you have. And depending if the shoot went well or terrible or just fine, which is still kind of like, well, there's still a lot of work to do. It can be like, it's fulfilling, but it's time consuming. It just depends on the project you work on. But especially when there's a tight deadline, that just makes it intense. It's like, I don't know. It's like you can't explain it. It's like you're just going off the rails
For sure.
as you're laying track down on the rails as it's going.
For sure. And I actually think, I mean, I found a tool recently which it helped a lot. probably helped me automate 80% of my jump cuts. It was called Time Bolt. And it basically, it pans through the audio waveforms of your video clip, and then it kind of cuts out the dead air, which when you get into Premiere Pro, once you have that, it gives you an XML file after you're done. You put it in Premiere Pro, and instead of spending time going, okay, remove 1 frame here, remove 2 frames here, you can just delete the bad takes and then get to the actual stuff that you want. That has been definitely helpful because, I mean, you can focus on a little more of the creative side than the monotonous cut, splice for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah. That's interesting because it's something I've been thinking about recently. Like I really enjoy the Tim Ferriss show and some of the things he talks about, like automating or outsourcing certain parts of his process so he can focus on the more creative parts. And the more I think about it, the more I realize like, oh, there are so many sort of like menial tasks I have to do to make this sort of like creative enterprise function. There's a lot of infrastructure that you have to work on. That would be nice, like to use a tool like that to just like get it done and you can just focus on the fun parts.
I'll ask the interviewer a question. Do you find that it's difficult to outsource or to let go of certain things? Because it's definitely something that I've struggled with. I'll say I can never let creative control go, but I'm trying to improve in that regard.
Yeah, I almost never have. I mean, I would say everything I've outsourced, and I wouldn't even call outsourcing on, but it's been on the podcast. I mean, it's like working with Ryan. Like we each do parts of it, or in the other podcast I do, like we trade it off, and it's a lesson I'm trying to remember. Like, this is really nice, like sharing responsibilities and not sort of like thinking so hard about every little thing, like if you have someone who you trust their judgment, it lifts off like so much pressure. Yeah. So as it becomes a little more profitable, it is something I would like to start mixing in.
100%.
Yeah.
It's like I said, it's a challenge for me, but it's definitely so rewarding when you get something back and you're like, oh, it's done.
Well,
but
it also makes you realize that like, even if something someone else does is not like exactly how it is in your head, it doesn't really matter that much. It's like you realize that like whatever is your vision in your head is not like the most important thing in the world, and that there are areas where like it doesn't. You can just be a little less neurotic, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And
for sure.
And that's like the good thing about having good collaborators, that like it kind of ground you in the sense that you're not going down the rabbit hole with your vision or being self-indulgent. Like some like people will say something, it kind of just makes you stop in the moment. It's like, oh wait, if I just, oh yes, and then that just helps and make it that much better. It's like it's nice having people where you can trust, that you can rely on to kind of help keep both feet on the ground and also just do what's right for whatever project that you're trying to do.
And just to continue down this tangent a little bit, like that self-indulgency though is one of my favorite parts of editing YouTube videos. Like when you have those moments of like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make every single one of these hammer strikes line up with like all the 16th notes in this song. And it's just going to be like this percussive ridiculousness that like I'm never going to ask anyone to do, but like I want it, so I'm going to make it.
Yeah, it's
a nice
it's
flow.
Totally, it's totally one of the most rewarding and enjoyable things about creating your own content. It's being able to do that stuff and be a perfectionist when you want. But I actually read something recently too, which kind of interested me, and I've been trying to apply it more and more, called the Pareto principle, and it was something like 20% of your effort gets you 80% of the result. And I because it's another thing that, I mean, every creative deals with is perfectionism. I mean, aside from letting go of control, which is slightly related in outsourcing, but perfectionism and just being able to accept that it doesn't, you're like you said, it doesn't matter necessarily if you did it or not. It's still probably going to pull off the same result for you if you're willing to just let go and accept that it's not 100%.
Yeah. And in the realm of making like YouTube videos, it's like, do I really need to spend an hour perfecting the end of this video if only 10% of the people watching it are actually going to get there? Maybe I should spend all that effort on the first 10 seconds, which is the most important.
Right. And creating that hook for them to stick with it. But
for sure,
I think that's something that takes time though. That's something like even for me, because when I first started delving into video and photo type of work, like it took me a while because I was a writer who always, saw things from the story perspective. And over that time, like I had to slowly mold myself into more of a video content sort of producer role. And that's something that takes time just through practice with different types of projects. So even though you do some things and they don't quite fit with what your vision was, you learn more about how to get them there for the next time you do something. It's like you have your ideas, the merits of your ideas are always very good, but the technical skill for that to match takes time before it reaches there. That's one thing that I've learned from doing like my documentary at Ryerson, is that like there are times where I was interviewing, Morley, and we're in the space in Ryerson, and like half the students are like in the library, they're like, what are you guys doing? And just like in the back of my mind thinking this is great, but at the same time like, holy shit, this is really happening. And just being able to then, once you get all the pieces there, you learned more about like, okay, next time I know like I would do this differently, and that will help you with whatever you're gonna do down the line. That's something that's always nice from this. Like every time you do it, there's something you learn about how you could do something just a little bit better for the next time.
Yeah, it's like a total constant refining of your creative practice.
Yes.
And it's been the same with I mean, again, specifically looking at this project. I mean, I could look at the stuff that I've done over my career and go, yeah, I noticed this slight change that made it so much better. But I guess specifically looking at the course as I was putting it together, I look at the videos that I shot maybe around like June 2020, and I'm like, okay, well, I made this slight tweak, and then July 2020 looked, a little bit better. Didn't make a huge difference, but now I look, it's February 2020. I'm like, okay, that's actually really good. Like all those changes amassed to something that's really cool. Like that's the fun part of
Yeah.
being in a creative niche.
Yeah, you look back a year ago and it didn't feel like all this things had happened, but you're like, wow, that is a stark difference. And it's all those incremental improvements.
Totally.
I just wanted to walk back a little bit because I'm very interested in your photography work, Kevin, especially your sports photography, because that is such a unique practice to do. Because portraits and landscapes are one thing, but to do sports photography, where so much of it is in the moment, where a second or a millisecond or half a second can change that entire moment. What's it like working in that space? Because that's something I never had the chance to delve into, but it looks so so thrilling. But
Looks very
what's
fun.
yeah, it looks very
It
fun, but
is.
like yeah, just what's it like, and how does that compare to other types of photography and even like video projects you've done?
It's definitely the hardest amount of work. I mean, from all the other stuff I do it like I mean, you've seen my portfolio, corporate video and all that other stuff, but it's definitely a ton of work, but super rewarding. Like I've sprinted down soccer fields to try and catch like a shot that I might or might not get, and then I miss it and it was a complete waste of my time. So I mean, I guess I got a workout out of it.
Right.
But no, it's definitely it's I mean, it's not a niche that of photography that it's particularly popular, but I've grew up playing soccer my entire life. I still play it even now. Well, not right now with COVID going on, but I still play it or try to at a recreational level. I've always watched sports, and when I was shooting and when I was in that experimentation area of time when I was kind of looking around to try and figure out what to do, which I mentioned probably around 2015, and I landed on sports. I did it just because I totally loved it. And I was like, yeah, if I have to do
Yeah.
something, because again, I was working a day job. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do something on the weekend, I'm going to love it. Like I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be sprinting down the side of a field to get a shot. And it's some games you walk out of there feeling like you don't know what you're doing at all. I'm like, why am I even shooting? But then other games you're like, yeah, I got the best shot. It's totally, it's totally, it's kind of up in the air. I mean, 50, probably I'd say 50% luck and 50% knowing the game. And then I guess maybe not 50% knowing the game, 40% knowing the game, and then 10% knowing how to use your camera. That's pretty much what it comes down to with sports. It's a lot of luck, but a lot of fun and reward.
That's surprising to me what you said, that it's not one of the more popular niches of photography. Because like if I'm watching an NBA game and I see those guys on the sidelines with like the massive telephoto lenses that just get like decked by LeBron James, I'm like, that looks like a blast. That looks like
Yeah.
and like and all those like images that people know of like Muhammad Ali,
Mhm.
standing over. I'm bad with sports history. I don't remember who he was
Yeah.
standing over, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, or
Or
like
like
Yeah, no.
Air Jordan, like all those
yeah,
moments that are
Bobby Orr in the air when he scores the goal.
Yep.
yeah, like those are such a large part of like our collective consciousness. I'm surprised that like more photographers wouldn't want to like that. That's not their dream.
I think it's primarily to do, I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's primarily to do with, income and limitations of income, because there's limited opportunity and there's a very small group of, it's weird. I mean, shooting more and more sports, I started to realize that it's actually kind of a close knit community, especially, I mean, the United States are different. I mean, they've got sports of every level and every kind being covered. But in Canada, I mean, the limited money that there is in sports are definitely at the top, and it's a concentrated group of people who shoot. and there's not a lot of opportunity.
Hmm.
You have to really knock on doors for a long time. And I mean, it took me a while too to even land my first paid job. I remember I was sending out dozens and dozens of cold emails and just trying to land a chance. And then finally I got a shot with the local college, and it was only because I sent 3 follow-ups being like, hey, would you mind giving me an opportunity? And finally, I mean, Ryan, you'll remember this. It was very true for me. One of our old professors, Zach, he said that you're kind of going to end up, circling and circling and circling and circling. And then eventually you're going to end up where you want to be. But the path isn't going to be clean. It's going to be like a messy, squiggly line the whole way around as you circle.
Right.
And that was basically mine. I was like, okay, am I going to get there eventually? Yeah, finally I started to break into that field. But yeah, that was kind of my journey. It was messy. It wasn't a clear path.
A lot of zigs and zags along the way. I mean, like that was a lot of freelancing that you were doing around this time, right? And what was that experience like freelancing? Because I did that for a little bit, and it can feel very, I don't want to say nerve wracking, but it could be like, especially when you're first starting out, it can be kind of like, oh God, where do I go from here?
Yeah, it was. I mean, for me, because like I said, I've been working a day job and I was doing it while freelancing. So I was, that was one of the reasons why I was able to keep sending out those cold emails and get no response whatsoever and be okay with it. Cause I was like, all right, I still got income. I'm all right with
Right.
this situation. But it's definitely, I have no regrets about doing it because it's taught me so much about, I guess, personal finance and the business side of the industry that I never would have thought of before. I mean, not to say that those aren't challenges that you don't have in other photography niches, but I mean, with sports photography where there's limited budgets and, limited opportunity, it's not like weddings where, there are a lot of couples out there that are willing to pay a premium for high quality photography and they will hire you. You really have to kind of finesse your way in without stepping on toes, and you have to learn what your realistic budget should be, and you can't just assume that somebody is going to pay you top dollar because there might not actually be top dollar. Like those are the kinds of things that I learned. I kind of learned from those experiences through shooting sports that helped a lot, and a lot of those too came from, I mean, I mentioned that before that I was shooting a lot of concerts and I was running an electronic dance music blog with a few friends from my undergrad, and we were shooting these
Oh,
concerts
neat.
for basically nothing, and it was a lot of fun. But again, like I said, it was tiring and exhausting, and at the end of the day, I couldn't keep doing it like the 3 a.m. thing and then going to work the next morning, which is why I
Yeah.
shifted.
So did you then transition away from sports photography to sort of other avenues of photography?
Yeah, it's been. I mean, with COVID in particular, I was still shooting, so I would say I primarily did most of the bulk of my sports photography work started around 2016 when I started landing more paid jobs. I continued consistently through to 2019, and then 2020 hit. I haven't shot a single sports game in a year, and it's definitely. And now I'm diving into another realm, which I'm shooting real estate now, which I I didn't think I would ever be shooting real estate, but I mean, it's been a way to keep busy, especially on the freelance side of things.
Yeah.
And it's taught me a lot about, a different industry that I had never explored. I was very fortunate. A couple of actually my high school friends were realtors, and just by sheer coincidence, they both reached out to me around like April, May, maybe because the real estate market got a little hotter around then. And they're like, "Do you want to shoot?" I was like, "Yeah, where am I? Tell me where to go." And it's pretty safe too for COVID times right now. I mean, wear a mask and you go into an empty house.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's just a different type of visual style where you're just capturing the scale of a nice parlor or a living room or a bedroom. But I guess it lacks the sort of like the intensity of the capturing a moment, or someone's like screaming "gotta go" and they're yelling and they're all passionate about, and you just ran down 90 yards so you could capture that.
Yeah, it's totally opposite. It's like the complete opposite of sports where you're like sprinting and running and trying to get the shot. Yeah, where real estate, you're like, okay, you've got a property, you've got 1 hour to shoot. Oh, I missed the shot. That's all right. I'll just go back and shoot it again. Like, there's no pressure.
The kitchen ain't going anywhere.
Nice. Exactly.
And,
it's actually kind of nice.
yeah, it's not like even nature photography where it's like you're not waiting for a moment. Everything is frozen in time.
For sure. Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess I'm probably making it simpler than it is. I guess there's obviously the time of day will definitely improve the quality of your real estate shots. if you're shooting near, golden hour or blue hour, it's going to look a lot better. And I mean,
Mhm.
if you're shooting luxury real estate listings, obviously clients are going to expect that you're going to the property multiple times a day. I've been dealing more with kind of high volume real estate where, it's get in and get out. You got an hour to shoot the property and leave.
Hmm.
So I haven't really had those experiences, but I know they're all relevant in real estate photography. And as I continue to explore that side of things, maybe I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I am going to a property multiple times a day to shoot or not.
Right.
Mm.
Do you have a sort of like favorite subject to shoot? Because it's interesting. Like I kind of like I was speaking to before. Like I use photography and videography as a tool more than as like a means to the end. Although that could be arguable considering the amount of like videos I'm putting out. But I mostly shoot one thing. I mean, it's making. It's sort of more like documentary style. But you seem just like very malleable in terms of like using photography as the final art form. You can do anything. So is it all just gravy for you, or you're like, oh no, like that is the type of photography I love?
I appreciate that you think so highly of my skill, because I actually don't think I think I definitely love candid shoots or any kind of candid shots.
Mm.
I don't mind. I have done stuff in studios. I've shot with lighting gear, but I love being, I love going to an event with just like a speed light on top of my camera, and okay, what's going to happen? I really don't know. Like, even I've dabbled a little bit in corporate event photography, and I mean, you get an itinerary. It's a little more structured than I suppose sports is, and a little more high pressure than real estate is, but you don't really necessarily know what's going to happen, who's going to be comfortable on camera.
Yeah.
That I definitely lean heavily towards candid type stuff. Um, even though I don't mind those experiences where you're directing a subject and whatnot, it's not what I lean towards or I favor. I think, I mean, most of the choices I've made to this point in my career have led me that way too. I look, and it's mostly, like I said, corporate events or sports or real estate, not so much, but concerts before all of that. All those
Yeah.
decisions are kind of themed around that
I
stuff.
mean, those are all things where you're capturing like a very specific emotional moment in time, and those are so evocative. My sister got married in September of last year, and when we got the photos back, it was just like, it was incredible. Like, yeah, she was an amazing photographer, and she took some really beautiful posed photos on the beach. But I was like, I don't care about these. I want to see like what was happening at the party. I want to see like ex cousin talking to Y relative and seeing the expressions in their face. Because that is something that like immediately brings back memories. And I think that really like people cherish the most when it comes to photographs.
That totally resonates with me, man. It's exactly how I feel. It's funny because of all the realms of the genres of photo and video that I haven't dabbled in much, it's actually weddings. Primarily because if I were to shoot I have done a wedding video. I did it. Here's a side note: don't shoot a wedding video by yourself. I did it once. It was the hardest thing ever. I said
Yeah.
sports were hard, but that was way more stressful. It's like you got to get every shot, and you're working by yourself.
Oh my
But no,
god.
I've always thought that when it comes to weddings or shooting weddings, both in the photo or video side of things, that I would prefer being more of a second shooter than a main shooter, because you can get those candid shots that are so impactful that that's really what fuels me. And I mean, you basically, you're speaking my language. It's exactly what I love to see in a picture. And those are the kinds of shots that I love to capture.
Awesome.
And it kind of takes the pressure off too, right? Being the second, because there you could get the
That too.
more smaller moments, but at the same time, they're almost in a way like they're just moments that maybe the main person isn't looking for. Whether it's like someone's making like doing a funny dance on the dance floor, or just there's a small moment between relatives and they're all happy, and it's nice being able to find those small moments.
100%.
What is there like a style of photography that you personally love more than others, whether it's just for recreational or professional use?
Um, that's a good question.
Other than the 90 yard runs down the soccer field.
I don't know. Yeah, those are I don't necessarily love those, but yeah, I guess the types of shots are the ones that you just mentioned. Those one, I mean, I said they're stressful, but those one in a lifetime shots where you either get them or you don't, and the moment's over, because those are the most rewarding. Those are the highest risk, highest reward shots. I know. I mean, there's obviously plenty of examples of that in sports and weddings, but just little things that, you know, you happen to turn your camera and you see somebody out of the corner of your eye just doing something that you may or may never capture again. I mean, those are the kinds of shots that I love capturing. If I had to describe one specific type.
Right. Like
Back up.
I'm
Sorry, go on, Ryan.
Yeah, no, it's just thinking because I know because I have family in Quebec City and I visit old Quebec very often, and it's especially in the summer it's very nice because lots of tourists are around. It has that old European style city, cobblestone streets and restaurants, and it's very nice being there because you see all these moments and there's photographers around and you see people while they're dancing to the outdoor music and they're able to capture a moment between like an old couple that's just dancing and they're in their like late 70s or something, or just people who are just looking out watching the sunset and the with the background of all these old historical buildings. It's just nice seeing those little moments
For sure.
and being able to capture them, and that's timeliness. You can't capture that moment again. Like all my favorite photos are from that city, just capturing the architectural style and the moments there.
Back in the before times when we could still go to movie theaters. Sorry, I think it was at the Ted Rogers documentary. I don't know, Hot Docs in
Hot
Toronto.
dogs,
Yeah,
yeah.
they were running a documentary about Bill Cunningham. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he's a photographer. He was a photographer in New York City. He died not too long ago, but he was known for riding his bicycle around until he was like 80 years old doing candid photography. And he was known as like the fashion photographer in New York. He would go right up to people and take a photograph of what they were wearing. And just like the courage that took just like blew me away. Like that is something I've always like been very impressed by in photographers, of like the instinct to capture that moment. Like he had no qualms about biking right up to a sidewalk and taking a picture of like this coat that he loved because he loved fashion. It wasn't that he was like a photographer. He called himself a photographer really at any point in his career, even though that's what he was known of. He called himself a fashion historian and he wanted to document that so much so that eventually it was like people wanted to be photographed by him, and they'd be like trying to get to the angle in the corner so that Bill Cunningham would take a picture of him.
It's street photography it's a beautiful thing. Actually, it's kind of nice when you just capture. I mean, obviously some people might think otherwise. They think of street photography and they go, oh, that's kind of creepy, but it's actually, just capturing people in their everyday environment doing everyday activities, or not necessarily having been planned to be photographed, but you can capture amazing moments. It's definitely something that I haven't been confident enough to dabble into, because like you said, I lack that level of being willing to go up to someone and just be like, hey, I'm gonna take that picture. It's always been on jobs. It's always been on paid gigs.
You just like walk up to them with like this massive telephotos lens right in front of their face.
Well, that's one of the amazing things now about like phone cameras, right? I mean, like, Kevin, you have even a video on your channel about just like how modern, flagship phones, the photo quality at some points is like indistinguishable from like professional DSLRs. And like whether that's for better or for worse, the implications of that or whatever, like it does make sort of like street photography a lot easier. And I remember like when I was doing a lot of bike courier work, this is classic me. It was right after seeing the Bill Cunningham documentary. I was like, oh, I want to get a little camera. So like while I'm biking around Toronto, I can do street photography. And I was like, hang on, I have a camera in my pocket all the time. Why don't I just use that?
For sure. The best camera, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this saying before, or you're at least familiar with some variation of it, but the best camera is the one that you have with you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, phone photography, you're right. I can talk a little bit about that video because it's been interesting. I think you're referring to the Samsung Galaxy S21 versus Canon camera video, which was it was kind of funny because that video got picked up. It was a relevant topic. The Galaxy S21 just came out 2 weeks ago, Ultra, and it had a 108 megapixel sensor in it. And I was like, how is this thing going to compare to a DSLR, a pro DSLR that I take to shoot? And it's amazing how interested people are in this topic, because it was reshared. I saw it was reshared by a variety of different photography websites, but then also some Russian tech blog picked it up, and I was like, what? And I saw half the traffic toward the video was coming from Russia. I was like, oh, that's interesting. But
there's
everyone's so
subtitles on the
fascinated.
bottom.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, everyone's so fascinated with this topic. Can you shoot professional quality images with a phone? And I think the answer is yes, with certain lenses. And there's still other lenses, I don't think I mean, for sure, I can say that the Galaxy didn't really match my telephoto lens when I was, comparing it in that fun comparison video. It still doesn't have that depth of field that you look for in professional shots, but
Mhm.
it just amazes me how many people are interested in looking and learning and seeing if it is possible.
Yeah.
And people are asking in the comments.
And so it seems to be like I saw a Twitter thread just from last week where there's like filmmakers were just like having a massive argument or a war just over this, saying like, oh well, it's not true cinema if you shoot on an iPhone, blah blah blah. And there was like filmmaker Leigh Warnell just waiting, so like, yeah, like I went to film school in the '90s where I had to buy effing film stock. Like of course I wanted an iPhone back then. That would make my life so much easier.
Well, it's also sort of like a backwards way of thinking, like the whole Super 8 film craze, right? It's like we laud this generation of cinematography because it was shot on these budget cameras, right? Like that's what Super 8 cameras are. They were affordable. But then if it's modern, it's no longer good. It's like, where is the logic there?
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of the time it's unfortunate because sometimes it can. I don't think it's going to be a barricade to technology and how it develops over time, but it is unfortunate because some people are ultimately discouraged. They think, oh well, I can't shoot with my phone; that won't be considered professional. But I mean, there's examples of there's one example in particular. There's a sports photographer based out of San Francisco named Brad Mangian, and he shot the PGA Tour with his iPhone or elements of the PGA Tour,
Hmm.
stuff that was candid stuff inside of media rooms or maybe in the cafeteria where people weren't necessarily expecting to be photographed, but by using his phone, which was so much more discreet than a huge honking 600 millimeter telephoto lens, he was able to capture more shots that he wouldn't have been able to take with that professional gear. I think there's definitely opportunity as long as you recognize one, how to use it, the phone itself, because there's all these cameras have pro mode, and then two,
Mhm.
of course, when not to use it, when it's not going to work.
And they're very different. Like you mentioned in your iPhone versus like the DSLR video, like that like phone cameras have changed an awful lot in just the last 4 or 5, even 6 years. Like they're nowhere near the same. Like I looked at my own iPhone from 2014. You go on the camera at night and it's just grain, like you're in the Midwest or something. It's just ridiculous. But and the other thing I liked about that video is like when you're comparing and contrasting those images, whether it's on a phone or DSLR, is that you don't just say which one is better. Like it just depends on the person, but you explore the nuances. Like it all comes down to lenses and lighting and editing and composition and whatever software you're using. You're kind of showing, how it doesn't really matter which one. You just have to know whether how to use a phone for its maximum value and using a camera for its maximum value.
Totally. And I think one of the things that, I mean, I explored this too when I was at Ryerson because I was part of my thesis there and everything, or my major research project. One of the things too that's amazes me with these phone comparisons, because yeah, I've done the iPhone and the Galaxy, is how close the photo and video features are. Like
Mm,
these are 5 years ago, it would have been impossible to take, well, maybe not impossible, but really hard to take professional quality pictures and videos with the same device, like a smartphone like that. But now you have these devices that are shooting 4K 60 frames a second video in HDR 10-bit or 12-bit, and then you're able to go and turn around and shoot a raw picture which is just as sharp and 108 megapixels. It's amazing to me.
yeah.
It's really cool how those two worlds are blending, especially for me because I'm doing a lot
Yeah.
of both.
Yeah. And even Steven Soderbergh, I think he's used the iPhone for like 1 or 2 film projects now, which is, it's
Really?
wild to think. Yeah. Like
Really?
he did a movie with Claire Foy called Unsane. And I think he did another one, but he's just interested in pushing it to the standard.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that speaks to like why people are so interested in this topic. It's not just technological process. It's something that is like bringing around a cultural shift. And I think that example you just brought up is like just shows that it's not really the equipment as much as it is the person using it. And it sounds cheesy, but like that does seem to be the case. Um, but I think a lot of people also get nervous where they're like, oh, like, is the photographer now an obsolete job? I don't know. I personally, I've seen a lot of really terrible Instagram accounts with a lot of good
Yeah.
content. So I'm gonna go and say no, it is not an obsolete job.
Slaps 3 filters on a photo.
Yeah.
I It's a really good question. I mean, there's another topic you could talk about forever. Is the industry of photography dying? I don't think so. I still think there's a lot of opportunity for professional grade images, even in a super specific field like sports, like I've been doing, and going up to the bigger stuff like weddings. That there's tons of opportunity there. I think there's always going to be people that are willing to pay for high quality images, but I think it's really tough to be just a photographer now. I mean, unless you're the absolute 0.01%, you're the Peter Hurley or the Joel
Right.
Grimes of the world.
Mm.
You're not just shooting pictures. You're doing stuff like I'm doing, shooting video, or you're doing other things, creating books or writing content, stuff like that to pad all of the photography or the stuff that surrounds it, because
Yeah.
there's a ton of interest in the field, but then at the same time, obviously, you have to be willing to diversify.
I mean, it's sort of the argument for the rise of AI, right? It's like robots will take over like automatable jobs, but humans will always need to be there for like creative control. It's like, yes, anyone can take a picture, but if I can't tell what the subject of your picture is, then like maybe I need a photographer to actually direct it. Um,
Yeah.
and do all the other like of creative functions that is the bulk of the job, not just like having the camera and taking the picture.
Mm-hmm. And just
For sure.
and it's like understanding the moment that you're capturing. I think that plays a big part of it. Even though we may not understand it the moment we capture that image, it's just that human intuition and instinct to like, okay, this means something.
For sure. I think that's something that it's ironic, because we've always looked at creative fields or creative industries as, the place where poor people go to live. Like it's a stereotype, obviously, of the creative industries. But I mean, if you look at it over time, I think that there's going to be continuing and plenty of opportunity continuing over time. I mean, just because, yeah, that's probably one of the hardest things to replicate. It's the creative element of content. Knowing when to press the shutter is very different from just, you could probably automate putting focus or getting focus right, but but I don't know if you could do that so much with knowing when to take the shot. That's still a very human element.
Yeah, there's an insane amount of variables that you're dealing with. Like and it's funny, like if you don't have a big photographic background, you're not super knowledgeable about it, but you're using it a lot, it can seem almost magic when it does work. Like I upgraded cameras about a year ago, and right before I upgraded, I made a video on making this sort of like bent lamination tape dispenser. And every time I like look back on the footage from that video, or I need to like look at it for some reason, I'm always like, did I shoot that with my new camera? Because this looks really good. And it looked really good because I was shooting outside on like a beautiful sunny day in the summer in Toronto. And there was this like red Adirondack chair in front of green grass, and just like all the colors popped. Everything was lit perfectly. And that did way more than like upgrading a camera ever could. And I've shot stuff on this camera before where I was like, why does this look so terrible? And I don't really know. I just need like more practice to like lessen those terrible shots. It's a much of
Yeah,
a trial by fire.
for sure. Obviously, the best way is to continue practicing and practicing, but at the same time, it's obviously, it has to do a lot with timing. And I'm sure you figured this out too with just what you were describing. It's literally what time of day you out there, like what are your lighting conditions. It sounds like, what camera was it, if you don't mind me asking? I'm actually really curious.
So my old camera, it was one of those like bulky point and shoots that masquerades as a DSLR. It was a
Yeah.
Sony CyberShot DSC
Yes.
HX200V. And now I have, off of Ryan's recommendation, I have a Panasonic Lumix G85, which I am.
Beautiful camera.
Oh
It's a
yeah,
beautiful camera.
I feel like every time I like find a new feature, I'm like, wow, I'm really just scratching the surface of this. I can do so much with this.
Yeah, I just got the 20 millimeter lens for the 25 millimeter lens for it, and it's wonderful. Like that's what I'm gonna use to shoot for my next documentary, and it just does what I need to. Just is able to capture that depth, because like my next project is very it's very based on history and nature, and it's gonna be like half a nature film for half of it. So just being
Yeah.
able to capture the shots that I need to, especially where I live, it's beautiful. The canvas is already painted. I just gotta go photograph it. So it's exciting.
That's my favorite focal length for shooting. It's 24 millimeters, that range. It's the most natural representation of your environment.
Huh.
It looks
It's
great.
nice, and just the way it blurs the background and keeps the subject in focus. Oh my gosh, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
That's
And
interesting.
and a lot of this what we're talking about, like because I've been thinking about this, like so much of this idea relates to gear, and I think a lot of the people who are watching your videos, Kevin, are going to relate to this, because a lot of people starting out, there's this kind of like sometimes it can feel overwhelming knowing or not knowing what type of gear to go for to use for your projects, whether it's like a phone or DSLR, or if you need like 10 kino floats and like a drone, then you need a second drone because in case you crash the first drone into a lake or something. And like it's
Done that.
I think that's just like a rite of passage. But like, because even I saw like you see tweets about that all the time. It's just like there's this obsession with like accumulating so much gear. And like I've seen you've had gear. Like when I was at Ryerson, all I had was like my camera, my tripod, and this Steadicam that my friend built me for $80 out of like a can't remember what the material is called, but like it was like a homemade like Steadicam. And then I saw
A
you
PVC
had
pipe.
PVC. That was a
Yeah,
PVC
that's
pipe,
it.
and because you looked at me and you were like, "What is that?"
I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, it's been a lifesaver on so many projects. But it's just it's just like for a lot of people, like when you first get into the space, especially if you don't have that technical background, that's a learning curve, and you're trying to find what works with you. And sometimes, like what I've learned is just working very minimalistically has helped a lot. But yeah, just what are some of your thoughts on that? Just trying to learn this very technical, crazy space.
I think, I mean, to the two parts to that answer would be, the first part would be, I mean, a lot of the times people see gear as, I mean, they use it or look at it as, this is going to be the solution to my problems, or this is the magic bullet I need. And I think I mean, obviously I couldn't shoot sports without a telephoto lens. Like there's certain pieces of gear that you do need. Yes. But it's by far the most popular question that people ask. It's, what camera do I buy? And I spend a bunch of time talking about it actually inside the course, because I literally break down every recommendation and what you should be looking for. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately about who's behind the camera. And I mean, to go to the second part of the answer, even if you've got, the most amazing person operating that camera or behind the camera, you got to remember that you shouldn't just look at, I guess, what other people are using. Like I look at other people's gear and I'm like, whoa, like I thought I had a lot. And then I see like what they have. But at the same time, I always try to remind myself of the process that went into it. Because it was discouraging to me at the beginning. I was like, wow, I've got a, basic entry level Canon and I'm trying to shoot a concert at night. That's not going to work.
Right.
but yeah, over time, I mean, it kind of accumulates, and then you're like, you look back and you're like, oh, I guess, yeah, that just kind of paid for that, and that paid for that, and that paid for that, and here you are.
Yeah, timing plays a big role in it, because I remember you shot an interview with one of our classmates, and you had this nice like lighting and like microphones and cameras, and you had this like little sliding scale. I can't remember what it's called, but I just thought like, and then I went up to him, just like, how did you get all that? and it's like you said, it's like you just got over time. It's just like you got each piece at the moment when you needed it, instead of like just diving in and getting everything that you thought you needed. They just kind of came to you, and you got them when at specific moments and situations and projects that you needed them for.
I have a funny story about that, actually.
Yeah.
It was the first time, I mean, like you said, like I was saying, obviously it's kind of a cumulative process, and you look and you're like, okay, I have all this gear. But there was one piece of gear in particular when I as I mentioned earlier, I had been sending out emails for months, like trying to get somebody to give me a job shooting sports. And I said to myself, once I get the job or some kind of shot, I will buy this telephoto lens that I need. And it was a pricier telephoto lens, and I was like, I'm not buying this unless I'm making money. And so finally I suddenly got the opportunity, and they're like, well, we need you to shoot in 3 days. I was like, 3 days? I was like, okay, I'll find a way to get this lens. And it was a specialty lens. And so I found it on Amazon from a company in South Africa that shipped it out of their Hong Kong warehouse and got it to me in Canada within 2 days. I was like, this is the most amazing logistical accomplishment ever. It was like, and I had it just in time for the shoot. But I was about to show up to that sports shoot, that first ever one, and not have the telephoto lens I wanted.
Yeah. I think I can totally understand why people would be just crippled with indecision on like, what camera do I buy? Cause like that is the starting point of it all. And I'm the sort of person where it's like, if I get one good option from a reputable source, I'm like, perfect. That's what I'm going to do. And that was Ryan suggesting the G85 to me. I was like, I've seen the shots he's done with this. Like, that looks good. Price range, awesome. That's what I'm going to get. But yeah, I definitely operate under the philosophy of like, once I like feel that like there is a barrier in my way, like I want to do something and I can't do it, and then eventually you realize, oh, it's because I don't have that thing. That then like, okay, well then now I need to get that thing. And it's nice that
Yep.
we can live in this world now where you have just in time shipping and you don't have to like go to these massive photography warehouses that are sparsely like B&H Photo in New York City. You can just order it online. And like now
I
I'm
hope someday I get to go there.
yeah, like now I'm realizing, wow, it's like I feel like I'm never able to get like everything I want in frame in my tiny workshop. Oh, maybe I need a wide angle lens. That's the next logical thing to get. Or like,
Yep.
oh, my face is not lit up at all in this like headshot. Oh, maybe I need a panel light or a ring light. Like it starts to become sort of a logical uh, progression. But that's also the nice thing about making YouTube videos. I feel is that like it doesn't feel like for me that there's this need for it to look every video to look super professional. Like I'm okay with each one being a progression over the last. But I can see that like if you were shooting events or something else, you're like, no, like from day one, we need it to be really, really solid. So then it's like a whole different game altogether. Like you need to be starting from a leg up.
For sure. I mean, your method of going into it, logistically approaching it and saying, okay, what is the problem I need to solve? That's always what I tried to ask myself every single time. But otherwise, you know, I'd be spending money on gear that I don't need, which I have done in the past, and I've learned from those mistakes. Like Ryan, you mentioned earlier, crashing a drone. I've done that. That was a mistake. Probably didn't need to buy the drone in the first place, but I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start a drone photography business. I'm gonna shoot real estate. And this is in like 2015 when drones were relatively new. I remember buying that, and I was like, what? In retrospect, I got it
Yeah.
repaired and then I sold it. But I was like, why did I buy that? Like, I didn't need that. So if you always ask yourself, what's the problem you need to solve? It's the best way to make sure that you're not buying stuff you don't need.
It's funny though, because buying stuff is like it's a habit you could get into. So like once you start buying things, then it's easy. Like I like did that today. Like I hadn't bought anything for weeks, and then all of a sudden today I bought like three things. And the first thing I needed, and the second one I didn't as much, and the third one was like totally unnecessary because I just got in that headspace.
It can be addictive once you start going down that route, but
That's the word.
it's nice. And the thing is, like, it's nice that with like Kevin's like online school, like you're able to get advice from someone who understands all this, like to get the context of like whether like this specific camera or this lens or this lighting or this drone that you want to crash into a lake is going to help you is going to is going to help you achieve whatever it is that you're trying to do, and not even just terms of like gear but also just techniques as well. Like I've saw a lot of videos where you just learn how to manipulate natural lighting or just weather sources of light that you have to have like a quasi professional look where you're shooting a subject, and that's helped me massively. It's to the point where some people couldn't even tell if I was using a proper keynote flow setup or something. So it's been nice. It's nice having these resources now to just learn from and being able to see, okay, that works in that situation, how can I apply it to whatever it is that I'm trying to do.
For sure. It's definitely it's one of those topics. I mean, when it comes to gear, but just in general photography, I mean, there's tons of tutorial content out there. But the one thing that I was trying to do specifically when I was building out the course was incorporate a little, not a ton. I mean, it's funny. I do 50-50 photo and video, but I was trying to incorporate a little bit of video because I mean, as someone that went from video and then started doing photo, I kind of had the opposite approach to it. I think there's definitely a little more that goes into video that you don't have to touch when it comes to photography, like the audio equipment, for
Mm-hmm.
example, or getting stuff like the $80 PVC pipe thing that you were talking about, stuff like that for
So worth
video.
it.
It looks awesome, man. It worked really well. But yeah, those are the
Yeah,
kinds of
exactly. Everyone's just like,
things.
ooh, what is it? There we
Yeah,
go.
those are the kinds of things I tried to work into the content. I was always trying to focus on, okay, yes, buy the stuff for photography, but then if you want to also shoot a little bit of video, this particular suggestion might help you with this, might help you think about that. Those are the kinds of things that I was trying to work in while still keeping it quick pace to the point as much as I could. Anyway,
Yeah. And now that Speedy Photographer is set up, what are your long-term plans and hopes for it? Or even just like what are some future projects that you want to continue forward with in the future?
I definitely want. It's funny because I want to use this course, even though I said, and I've talked for a large chunk of this, uh, you know, our discussion about shooting sports. I definitely want to use the course as also a means for me to get back into some of the other stuff that I enjoy shooting. For example, I mean, I'm putting together now training videos on inside the course on how to shoot real estate, which wasn't something that I was shooting prior to pre-pandemic. But now I know I've had those experiences and I want to relate them back and start shooting different realms. I don't think I'll ever, I don't want to be stretching myself thin, but I'm definitely interested in exploring other stuff that I haven't before to kind of diversify and push myself into new creative ways of thinking. I'll still always love shooting sports, but it's fun. It's been fun actually kind of shooting a totally different realm that I never thought I'd touch. And that's where I'm hoping to take the course to. And I'm obviously going to continue putting out new content because I'm just hoping to grow and add and build a bigger resource to the best of my ability.
That's awesome. It's super exciting.
Yeah, pushing towards new horizons. And it's funny, like you said, like, you never thought you'd be doing real estate, but here you're using your skills in that, and you're just learning as you go, and that's awesome.
For sure. It's I mean, at the end of the day, I think as I've gotten older, I've enjoyed, I guess ultimately, if I had to distill where my career is hopefully heading as time goes on, I'll never put down a camera, I don't think. Well, no, I definitely will never put down a camera, period. But but I'm really enjoying the education side of things. Like my day job is doing photo and video in an educational environment. I went back to school, even though I was working that day job and doing my freelance work. I've always loved education and the education realm. I think that's probably where I'm going to try and push some of the new content and I guess my career as I dive deeper into new topics and new things.
Yeah, and that's we didn't really have a chance to talk about it too much in this episode, but that in itself is like a super valuable skill that a lot of people really struggle with, is even if they're very knowledgeable in something, is teaching it. And that is definitely something that comes across, that like you like teaching, you enjoy teaching. And not that just like you have this experience that you're like trying to share.
Yeah. It's definitely an art for sure. I honestly, like I said, I never really knew where my career was going to go in my early 20s, but then it kind of started to just evolve naturally. And I think things happen for a reason. And like I said, as long as you keep circling around what you want to do, eventually you end up where you want to be. And I mean, as I move more into education, yeah, I do enjoy it. So why not keep doing it? That's kind of my philosophy. I just want to do stuff in the realm of the field of, photography and video production that makes me happy. And if education is it, then so be it. If it ends up being real estate, so be it. I'll just keep going in whatever direction that is.
No, that's great. Like you have to stay flexible in this world. Especially things are changing faster and faster.
And you always have to be open to new experiences. Like even just for me, like just trying different things has led to new opportunities that I never would have imagined. Like simply like when I interviewed Morley for my research project for Ryerson, like I never imagined would lead to this podcast. So it's nice. It's nice just trying new things always leads to something new down the line that you never expected, but it's always awesome and it leads to new adventures all the time.
For sure. That's definitely the most rewarding thing about this field is, in creative field in general, just turning back and going, oh, wow. Like, yeah, I did that, I guess. Like, and that's how I got there. But I didn't know. You never really know how you're going to get to a point. I never knew I would get to this point where I'm on a podcast talking to you guys about photo and video, but somehow all of these experiences in the field brought me here. And that's just, I mean, it's nice to look back on things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we are. So that's so I think now is probably a good time to segue to what we're putting into the spotlight for this week. And Kevin, as the guest of honor, would you like to kick us off with that?
Sure. There's a piece that I saw, and it's funny. I cannot for the life of me. I was trying to, prior to this podcast, to find the specific video, and I can't find it. I promise you I'll send you a link afterward. But it's essentially a piece that looks at education, and it starts off, the first 30 seconds go, this was, these were American or North American roads 100 years ago. These were North American offices 100 years ago. These were North American schools 100 years ago. And it shows them, looking like what you'd expect 100 years ago. And then it does the same thing again at 50 years. And then it does the same thing again now in 2021. And it shows, here's an office which hasn't changed, or which has changed and evolved over time to open concept. Here's, roads and streets, which haven't, they've changed, I guess, a little bit more, but the classroom still looks the same. You're still sitting there. You're still looking forward at someone standing at the front speaking. I think when I saw that piece, it really impacted me because I thought, wow, I mean, we've learned a lot through COVID in particular, about how we need to transform and reapproach the way that we look at multitude of things. But education, I think, is definitely one of them, and it's definitely the one thing that I've, again, like I said, one of the motivating factors behind putting together that online course. Because like I said, I was at the beginning of this, I was I went back to school to Ryerson to do that master's degree. Uh, just so I could become a college prof. But then that video kind of succinctly summarized it for me. I looked and I went, wow, school hasn't really changed in the last 100 years. The way we deliver information and education in any space, whether it be creative or anywhere else, hasn't really changed. And that video definitely resonated with me a lot. I will find it and send it to you guys so you can see it.
Yeah, it's no problem. That's fantastic. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, and you, Morley.
Yeah, well, so I have kind of like a mini one and then my main one, because what Kevin said reminded me of something. And Ryan, I feel like you would really like this, and I'm sure Kevin, you would as well.
Sure.
There's this short little video series that Vanity Fair started doing, and it's called Increasingly Personal Questions as the Camera Closes In. So essentially, they have I don't know if you guys have seen this, but they have a camera on a dolly, and the dolly is way back, and they ask a question. The interviewee answers. It's been like Billie Eilish, RuPaul, various celebrities so far, and as the camera gets closer, the questions get more and more personal. It's a very interesting concept that like they've only done a few of so far, but I think they can take it in very interesting places. So that's my mini one. Ryan, with your thing for off camera, I feel like you might like this.
Oh, I know.
The main one I want to talk about is it's the newest Tim Ferriss episode. Might not be by the time this comes out, but it is episode 498, and it is with Josh Waitzkin. As I talked about earlier in the podcast, like I really enjoyed the Tim Ferriss show, and the reason this episode really resonated with me is because like I am just blown away at Tim Ferriss's interviewing abilities, and like a lot of interviewers can fall into the trap of like making it too much about them and not as much about the guest. But Tim Ferriss like really melds the two very well, I think. He never like wastes a good guest. And I was really excited when I saw he was going to be on the podcast How I Built This with Guy Raz. Because I was like, oh, now we can like learn more about Tim himself. But it kind of fell flat with me. I didn't find like that he was great for that podcast. But what I do really enjoy is when like he talks to his close friends and people who can interview him a little more. So this was like, or just a really great casual conversation with him and a good friend. And they kind of get at his goals in his interviewing and how he has developed his interviewing style. And they also kind of get into something which I think a lot of people who listen to this podcast would enjoy, in the sort of tendencies of like a type A creative entrepreneurial person who is always just like wants to like go, finds it difficult to find moments of quiet, and just sort of like various mental health and other ways to handle that. It's a really good conversation. It's pretty wide ranging, as some of my favorite Tim Ferriss episodes are. But I will link it in the show notes. Episode 498 of the Tim Ferriss Show.
Sweet. So for my Into the Spotlight for this episode, I'm sure you all remember our episode 12 guest, Awesome Chroma. So on that episode, he discussed about posting some of his short films and other work that he's done. And he's started doing that. And he started in December and he just posted another one a few days ago. He's posted his short documentary, T for Tango, and his experimental short film, Buried Love. And I just thought it was a good time to kind of put a spotlight on that because Awesome's a great friend. He has a really interesting filmography, and he just posted these films to YouTube now. T for Tango is a short documentary about 10 minutes long where it's about the intimate connection of Argentinian tango dancing and the way he blends like old music and different the dancers together and hearing their perspectives on why this sort of dance is so intimate and why it creates such a powerful connection between dancers. It's a really awesome film to watch. It's awesome. I know, no, but that was fun wasn't intended, but it's a great film to watch. He's able to capture the visual flair of that so well. And this experimental film, Buried Love, like it's a fun little surrealist, abstract dream movie about love and relationships. And he posted that on Valentine's Day, which is pretty good timing, I guess. So no, he's a great friend, and I'm happy he's putting his work out there. And he's like, just inspiring for me to see like, some of our cohort and our colleagues putting their work out there, and it's inspiring me to do the same. So yeah, check out those.
Nice. I've definitely checked those out. I haven't yet had a chance to watch T for Tango, but now that
It's
you,
wonderful.
yeah, now that you mentioned it again, I'm definitely going to
I've
watch
got to
it
watch
soon.
it. I've got it. You also reminded me too. I'll wrap up, but you reminded me as soon as you said how I built this with Guy Raz. There was an episode that I listened to which was transformative. I loved it. It was the one where he interviewed Riot Games co-founders, and he
Okay.
talked about their journey. And it was exactly what we've been talking about this whole podcast episode. It was just a total mess where they had no idea where things were going or how they were going to scale, and they somehow did it. And that definitely resonated with me. I heard it about a month ago and I absolutely loved it. You just reminded me of it.
Cool.
Morley. I hadn't thought of it.
Yeah, I remember, Kevin, you shot a video. I can't correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your brother was in it too. It was like an esports video, right? For
Yep.
university. Yeah, I love that. That was a
Yeah.
really cool video.
Yeah. He played high level he still does actually, League of Legends, and he was the captain of Western University's team, and they qualified to go to Los Angeles, and I got to travel with them there and shoot it. So that probably is also why that episode on Riot Games resonated with me, because I had been there a couple times. So but yeah, the story too of those two co-founders is awesome.
That's really cool. And then at least the thing about making esports videos that you don't have to run 90 yards down the field to capture a shot.
Yeah, it's different. They give you no access, so I couldn't shoot very much.
Oh, no.
Oh, dang.
Oh gosh, that's funny. But no, this was a fantastic episode. Kevin, thank you so much for taking your time to be here to share your insight and experiences and around photography and videography and just being an interesting creative all around. I appreciate it. It's nice seeing you again. We should stay in touch more often.
100%. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the kind words, and you guys are doing a great job. I really enjoyed sitting here and talking with you. Have me on anytime. I'll talk all day long if you'd like.
Yeah, it's not just kind words. I was watching I was watching one of your videos right before we hit recording, and I was like, crap, I have to stop watching this so we can record, but I want to know like the rest of these 8 tips for shooting on a phone. Like, they're really good.
I appreciate it.
The binge watch continues right after this.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, Kevin.
No, thank you both very much.
Oh, and before everything, obviously all of Kevin's links will be in the show notes. But speedyphotographer.com, Kevin Raposo on Instagram and on YouTube, all that will be linked so you can find all of his stuff. All right.
Yeah, perfect. All right, guys. So same time tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Thanks again. It's great. Until the next time, everyone.